The kingdom of Aranthia had long been a patchwork of rival territories, each ruled by minor lords and petty chieftains. Amidst this turbulence, a young warrior named Kale rose through the ranks, known for both his sharp mind and unyielding courage. His victories in border skirmishes earned him recognition and fear in equal measure. Kale's ascent was marked by cunning alliances and decisive battles. By the age of 25, he had unified half the northern provinces under his banner, a feat that few thought possible. Nobles who doubted him either bent to his authority or vanished from records entirely. His reputation was not merely of a soldier, but of a strategist who could anticipate both enemy and ally. Once crowned, King Kale transformed the capital into a hub of commerce and culture. Palaces rose along the riverbanks, and marketplaces buzzed with merchants from distant lands. Scholars and artisans flocked to Aranthia, bringing knowledge of astronomy, architecture, and medicine that had previously been the privilege of only the wealthiest courts. Despite the grandeur, Kale's rule was not without strictness. He demanded loyalty and precision from his officials, and minor negligence was punished with public admonishment. The king believed that discipline was the backbone of a thriving state, and his courtiers learned quickly to fear the consequences of failure. The streets echoed with the clang of workshops and the strict marching of guards. Kale also had a fascination with control and order, traits that extended into the shadows of his court. While he encouraged learning and artistry, he also cultivated a network of spies and informers. No corner of the kingdom remained unmonitored, and whispers of rebellion were often silenced before they could form. His intelligence network became a silent, invisible hand that guided the loyalty of his people. In matters of law, Kale was both admired and dreaded. He instituted a system of courts that were fair in principle but unforgiving in practice. Justice was swift and unrelenting, designed to maintain order and suppress dissent. Stories circulated of the king watching trials from concealed balconies, measuring not only the guilt of the accused, but also the loyalty of witnesses and officials. King Kale's evenings were a mixture of council meetings and private reflection. He often walked the palace corridors alone, listening to the distant sounds of the city. His advisors speculated about his thoughts, but no one could truly know the depths of his contemplation. Even in solitude, he weighed the stability of his kingdom against his own ambitions, preparing for challenges that might arrive from beyond the borders. By the peak of his reign, Aranthia was a formidable power, respected by neighbors and feared by those who once mocked it. The king's methods were harsh but effective, and his name became synonymous with strength, strategy, and the unrelenting hand of authority. The city thrived under his rule, yet beneath the surface, the instruments of control he favored hinted at darker measures yet unseen. The Hanging Rattle Box was an instrument of terror unlike any other in King Kale's arsenal. On first glance, it appeared deceptively simple, a small, crude wooden box reinforced with iron bands, barely large enough to fit a human head. Its surface was etched with crude marks, symbols that once served ritualistic purposes but now functioned as identifiers, allowing the executioner to track individual victims and their periods of exposure. The craftsmanship, however, was deliberate. Each curve and edge served to amplify the psychological torment as much as the physical confinement. Guys, can you help me to hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel? And it's my dream. Sorry for interruption. It's humble request. Let's jump into the video. Inside the box, loose metal balls or small pebbles rattled endlessly with even the slightest movement. The interior walls were lined with thin wooden ridges, designed to prevent the stones from settling in one place. Every nod of the head, every involuntary twitch, transformed into a loud, jarring clatter. This cacophony invaded the mind before it reached the ears, creating a disorienting environment that blurred the line between reality and illusion. The design was engineered not just to punish, but to dominate the senses entirely. The weight of the box was carefully calibrated, heavy enough to press uncomfortably against the neck and shoulders. It forced the victim into a stiff, unnatural posture. The edges were worn smooth to avoid immediate injury, yet small imperfections ensured constant irritation against the skin. Victims soon discovered that movement to relieve tension triggered a new wave of rattling, a feedback loop that made stillness the only temporary reprieve. Pain and fear were inseparably linked in the confined space. Application of the rattle box followed a ritualized procedure. The victim was first restrained with ropes or straps, often secured to a post or frame to limit mobility further. The box was then carefully lowered over the head, locked in place with iron clasps that required no key for hours on end. Once sealed, the victim's vision was obscured, leaving only the sounds of rattling and the faint scent of wood and iron. This sensory isolation heightened the psychological impact, amplifying even minor auditory stimuli into overwhelming disturbances. In practice, the method exploited both instinct and panic. Human brains are wired to respond to sudden, unpredictable noise with stress hormones and heightened alertness. Within the rattle box, this response was constant. The victim could hear metal clattering against wood with every slightest tilt of the head, every attempt to adjust their position, creating an unending cycle of anxiety. Dizziness soon followed as balance and spatial awareness were compromised. The simple act of lifting or turning the head became a gamble between physical relief and auditory torment. Prolonged exposure intensified effects dramatically. Hours became days, though the passage of time itself became distorted. With no clear visual reference, victims often misjudged the duration of their confinement, amplifying disorientation. Sleep became nearly impossible. Even light dozing triggered violent clattering that startled the mind awake. Psychological strain built to the point where some victims could no longer differentiate between the sound of the stones and imagined voices or footsteps. Auditory hallucinations were common, a cruel extension of the box's torment. The sensory assault did not end with noise alone. The weight of the device induced neck pain, headaches, and tension in the shoulders and upper spine. Victims quickly learned that even slight movement exacerbated the pressure. The interior dimensions of the box ensured that breathing became shallow and deliberate, adding a suffocating quality to the experience. In combination with disorientation, this led to a sense of near-complete helplessness, which was exactly the goal. Executioners had specific techniques to maximize suffering. Some would periodically jostle the box, increasing the volume and unpredictability of the rattle. Others monitored the victim's reactions, noting when the victim attempted subtle adjustments and intervening to startle or correct them. In some cases, the box was suspended from a frame, allowing it to swing slightly, adding a vestibular element that caused nausea and further imbalance. Every innovation was designed to exploit natural human vulnerabilities: fear of confinement, inability to control the environment, and sensitivity to abrupt noise. The box's use was highly adaptable. It could serve as punishment for minor offenses, a tool of interrogation, or a mechanism to terrorize communities. Sometimes victims were chosen for public humiliation, displayed while restrained to show the inevitability of the king's justice. The rattling became a grim announcement of their suffering, a warning to others. The psychological terror extended beyond the immediate prisoner, affecting witnesses who associated the sound of clattering with inevitable torment. Notably, the box often broke down the mind before the body. Victims frequently developed panic attacks, hyperventilation, and extreme anxiety. Many experienced vertigo and nausea within hours, while others suffered tremors or spasms from prolonged tension. Auditory hallucinations sometimes persisted even after removal, leaving survivors haunted by phantom rattling. Physical bruising from pressure and slight abrasions on the neck and scalp were common, though temporary compared to the enduring psychological impact. The hanging rattle box was also a study in subtlety. It allowed for punishment without overt bloodshed or visible trauma, creating an air of inscrutable cruelty. Officials could administer prolonged torment without leaving marks that might evoke pity or outrage. In this way, King Kale's court could maintain an image of order and decorum while instilling deep fear. Torture became an instrument of governance, a quiet assertion of dominance over body and mind. Even the materials used contributed to the effect. The wooden box absorbed sound poorly, allowing metal balls to strike with a metallic resonance that echoed inside the skull. Iron bands reinforced the sense of confinement, their cold touch against the skin reminding the victim of the rigid, unyielding nature of their predicament. Artisans took care to create an interior that was both tight and resonant, an acoustic chamber of torment. The ultimate terror of the rattle box lay in its unpredictability. The victim never controlled when the sound would escalate, when the balance would falter, or how long the confinement would last. Even the smallest motion had immediate consequences, and the mind could never relax. This uncertainty, coupled with physical restraint, created a form of sensory and psychological domination unmatched in other contemporary devices. Over time, accounts of the rattle box spread through whispered tales. Survivors spoke of relentless noise, crushing stillness, and a gnawing sense of helplessness. Some claimed it drove men to madness, others to fevered submission. In King Kale's court, the instrument became a symbol of power, a demonstration of his ability to control not only bodies but minds. The box was an extension of his will, a tool of fear calibrated with precision, and an enduring testament to the cruelty that underpinned his reign. The hanging rattle box was never just a torture device. It was a psychological weapon. Its construction, deployment, and effects exemplified the meticulous approach to fear cultivated in Aranthia. Sound, confinement, and unpredictability converged into a singular method designed to break resistance without relying on bloodshed. It was a dark art, perfected over years, and an instrument through which King Kale's dominance extended into the very senses of those who dared defy him. The whispers of King Kale's cruelty spread beyond Aranthia's borders, carried by traders, travelers, and fleeing survivors. Tales of the hanging rattle box reached distant courts, spoken in hushed tones as a symbol of the king's relentless grip. Within the capital, fear had become an invisible architect, shaping the lives of citizens and courtiers alike. No one moved without thought. Every action was measured against the possibility of the king's scrutiny. Even those who had prospered under his rule felt the weight of constant vigilance. Merchants calculated their words to avoid offending officials, soldiers maintained rigid routines, and scholars hesitated to question orthodoxy. The rattle box's legacy extended far beyond the walls of the palace. It had become a tool of internalized terror, shaping loyalty through dread rather than respect. The city's vibrancy was tinged with an undercurrent of silent panic. Some victims of the torture survived, but they bore scars that no medicine could heal. Auditory hallucinations persisted long after the boxes were removed, and nightmares echoed the relentless rattle of metal against wood. Many were physically weakened, their necks stiffened, their shoulders and heads perpetually sore. Their testimony reinforced the legend, a chilling reminder that escape from Kale's will did not erase the horrors endured. Despite the terror, King Kale's reign continued with the same calculated precision. The kingdom thrived in outward appearance, yet its foundation rested on fear. Loyalty was coerced, compliance enforced, and obedience ensured through psychological domination. The hanging rattle box had proven that rule through terror could be as effective as rule through armies, binding minds even as it restrained bodies. Over time, the devices themselves became relics, stored in hidden chambers or entrusted to select officials for future use. They were reminders of the lengths to which Kale would go to maintain authority. The instruments of control, though mechanical in nature, had reshaped the kingdom itself, leaving an imprint on culture, governance, and the collective consciousness of its people. In the quiet corridors of his palace, the king reflected on power and fear. Each day brought new challenges, new whispers, and new opportunities to reinforce his control. Yet even as he exercised dominance, the subtle cracks in obedience began to emerge. Though the hanging rattle box had achieved its purpose, it could not quell the growing tension simmering beneath the surface. Fear had its limits, and even the most precise instruments of terror could not suppress the human instinct for defiance indefinitely. King Kale's legacy, therefore, became inseparable from the devices he employed. The rattle box stood as a symbol of his genius and his cruelty, a testament to a reign defined by unyielding control and a reminder that power enforced through terror leaves an indelible mark on both ruler and realm.